Ladies and gentlemen, and the power hungry of all ages, welcome to the Markman M2 video series. This is Markman. In this video, we're going to do an unboxing and setup of a inverter generator, the EDOG04. I purchased this unit on Amazon, and it was shipped to the Amazon-owned Whole Foods store in my local town. It took about 5 days to be delivered from Georgia to Arizona. The unboxing is quite detailed, and the setup includes a do-it-yourself electric starter. Enjoy. The generator weighs 65 pounds, and that's about 29.5 kilograms, and its size is roughly 18 by 19 by 15. Okay, let's get started. Always be careful when you're using a razor or a knife to cut into a box. Make sure that you're not cutting too deep in case there's literature or anything up towards the top. You don't want to puncture anything that might be in the box. Sometimes they'll pack packing slip right inside the top, so you have to be careful. I do notice that, like most things on Amazon, the box is very well packed. It seems very durable, and I'm sure that the contents have shipped just fine. It does seem to be an original factory packed carton. I always look out for that. I usually open from the bottom just in case there's a return, but in this particular case I'm just going to open from the top because I'm relatively sure I'm going to be keeping this unit. Factory packaging is your first indication that you have indeed received a new factory unit. Okay, one more thing about the carton itself. We see a danger label down here, and it's reminding you that this generator is not designed to be operated inside the house or inside the garage. Even with the door open, it shows a picture. They show a diagram that shows the generator must be away from the dwelling, or it must be away from the house. Shows a house generator with an arrow pointing away. You are watching the Markman M2 video series. This is inverter generator unboxing. Now on the flap, this is interesting. It's showing me that there is no oil in the unit, so it's reminding you. It'll probably remind you a few times. Oil, of course, is critical on all generators, small engine generators. Usually, every time I've seen a newer one now that they have a low oil shutoff. So if the oil runs low, the generator will not work in the standard condition. A lot of people just go ahead and disconnect that. If you do, you have to be extremely careful to always check your oil. Okay, it seems to be carefully packed. We have a little warning label to avoid suffocation. They're just reminding you that the bag itself is dangerous. I'm going to go ahead and tilt it on its side so that you can see. As I said, it's 65 pounds, so it's not too heavy. I'll be able to pull it right out of there. Okay, so we have our literature, we have our user's manual. It's probably a quick start manual, and then we have a couple tools and a little tool bag, so that's a nice effort by them. Seems as if there's something else here. Oh, they gave you a little funnel. That's nice. I actually bought a funnel here recently, but it gives you a little funnel. Most likely this is going to be for the oil filler cap. Okay, so we see the top. It's got a nice filler cap here. It is plastic, although, no, it does appear to be metal. I almost thought it was a plastic finish, but it does appear to be tin. So that's pretty good. And it's got a chain, and it seems like it's always venting. So remember, that's important. It also has a vent line, or this is probably to feed the fumes into either the valve area. It's an overhead valve engine, either where the valves are, or sometimes it feeds it right back into the carburetor. I'll let you know as soon as I see that. And then we have a little mystery thing here. I don't know. It's probably, I don't know if it fell off or if it's an extension of something. I'll put it on the side. Okay, so we'll pull this out. So far, my first impression is very good. I'm very happy with this so far. I think it was well packaged, and I think the unit looks actually pretty good. If you tuned in, you probably were interested in this particular generator. It's a 4,000 watt generator, but what makes it different, it's inexpensive, relatively speaking, but it's an inverter, similar to the ones that are very quiet and in the case. This is an inverter generator, but it's an open frame inverter generator, relatively low cost. So that's got a lot of people interested, meaning you have clean electricity, because it's gone up. As we're going into the summer, it's early May right now. By June or July, these will be in high demand, and they've gone up about $100 so far. I'm just going to go ahead and put the filler cap back in, just so we don't have this bouncing around. Oh yes, I wanted to point out, I was going to say that it has a gas gauge right here. And I like this gas gauge because I can see it moving, so it has a really good flow, has a very active flow. It didn't just bottom out and stay there and waiting for fluid to push it up. If you can see it, it looks like it's really active as I tilt it. It seems like something you would actually look at and use. Most gas gauges on generators, you don't even bother, especially if the generator's vibrating somewhat, the needle's jumping around anyway. But this looks like a pretty good one that I would use. All right, let's look at the face panel. We'll see what we got here. Okay, notice, remove the bracket before use. Okay, so there is a bracket on here. I believe it's this red bracket that they're talking about. This was to hold the engine in place, and it didn't allow it to swing free on the motor mounts, which are somewhat, I guess they're rubberized. I would have to think there's something inside the rubber holding it somewhat static. However, I guess they feel that they needed to shore up the engine during shipping so it wouldn't bounce around. And I'll let you know how much play there is once I release the red bracket. There might be two of them. I have to look on the back. Yes, there was two of them. I'll just go ahead and swing it around and show you. It's not that heavy, so it's easy to do. And there's the other one, if you can see that. So you have a red bracket on the front and on the back. And like I said, I'll just indicate this quickly. This is a very good muffler. You have two valves in here that need to be adjusted. Not now, of course, it's brand new, I wouldn't touch it. But down the road to do adequate maintenance, a lot of people don't understand this. You need to get a feeler gauge, a flat feeler gauge. I'll show you one in a minute. And you need to take out the 4 bolts, and you have to put the feeler gauge in between the little, they call it a lash, and you put it in, and then you have to adjust that rocker arm to make sure that the valves are operating. You have one for the exhaust, which is on this side, obviously, because this is the exhaust, and then here's the carburetor, so that's your intake. So you have an intake valve, and you have an exhaust valve. And this is very important. A lot of people miss this. These do need to be adjusted. We're not going to adjust it now. I'm not even going to open it now because it's brand new and it was set at the factory. Apparently, they ran this motor before they shipped it. I was reading about that. They actually ran the motor, drained it, drained the oil, drained the gas, or maybe they didn't have gas in the tank. They probably fed it right into the carburetor. But they did start it and run it. Okay, so I'm going to turn around to the recoil. Now, this is what I've been waiting for personally. I don't use recoils. If I could show you the other generators I had, all the recoils are gone. and I use a power drill to start. And I'll show you how I do that, because that's interesting. Even though this doesn't have electric start, if you have access to, let's say, a Craftsman 20 volt or Milwaukee or any of the better brands, I wouldn't use a cheap Black & Decker or something like that. But if you have a fairly decent, good power drill. Now, you may ask about a 1/4-inch impact driver, because that's what a lot of people have. Impact drivers don't really work for starting engines. You need a good, hefty power drill. And I just use my Craftsman power drill. It's 20 volt. It is brushed. It's not the brushless. It is brushed, and it works great. And I'll hook that up for you so you can see, but that'll be towards the end of the video, because this is really a unboxing, and then we're going to do setup. I'm just going to show you everything, and then I'm going to pause, and then we'll get into the actual setup. Okay, to avoid danger of suffocation, keep this by, okay, so it's more about the plastic bag, or I probably misplaced this. It was probably on the bag, and then it found its way onto that. Okay, so here's our recoil start. And I'm just gonna, you shouldn't really have to do this, but I do want to open this for you to see it. I have had a case where they had the filter covered in plastic. So we're going to open it. It looks like it's good to go. Now, some people prefer, this is interesting, when you start it, you could really take this out and then maybe shoot a little starting fluid beyond the sponge or the filter part to start it, and then put everything back. And then some people like to lightly oil these. Now, I don't know if they've oiled it. It doesn't really feel like they did. I mean, there might be very light oil on there, but some people like to soak it in oil, clean it with gas, and then it has oil, which is grabbing the dust as well. We have a petcock, or we have a gas flow valve, and they're saying that's nice that they mark that, because some people get confused. Although if you're familiar with industrial valves, you always know if the pipe is running this way, and the valve is like this, it's cutting it off. Just remember that. If it's in this position, it's cutting it off. If it's in the position of the line, like this, it means it's flowing. And that's an industrial standard. That's for natural gas valves, that's for water valves, that's for every kind of industrial valve, almost universal worldwide. But there are other valves that are used for different things. Maybe in industrial process or something that might have, maybe they have a flow or a ball and they have to position it differently. But by and large, if you're this way, it's going to be off. If you're this way, it's going to be on. And that's what this is telling us. I'm just going to go ahead. I don't want to have to think about it later. I'm just going to move it on the on position. And the way I do things, I don't think that'll ever be moved to the off position ever, because it really doesn't need to be. I'm not really going to ship it. I'm not really going to transport it. It's pretty much going to be stationary. So I see no reason why I'd be turning it off or on. And there is no reason. There's in the ball, they call it a bowl of bowl of the carburetor, which is underneath. I'll show it to you. There's a float in there with a valve. So when it needs gas, it drops, it opens, and allows gas to flow in. When it's full, it goes up and it closes the valve. So theoretically, it controls itself. You don't really need to supervise it. So I'm just going to leave it open. It's got a quick start guide. I'm going to go over this again later when I actually go to start it, but it is very comprehensive. So if you have any trouble with mechanical understanding of small engines, these are great. You just follow along. And this also helps you to get the switches, because there's going to be multiple switches involved that you have to have in position. So this is very good for a guide, a quick guide, and that's what it's saying, quick start guide. They put that sticker up here again, by the way. I don't know, carbon monoxide poisoning can be very dangerous, but I think it doesn't allow for people that, understand that. Like, in other words, if you're in the garage and it's well vented and it's raining out, and you pull this on the edge of the garage and you have ventilation, you have air coming in, I don't think you're going to suffer from what they're talking about. I think they're just kind of indicating to you, for product liability standpoint or whatever, for safety, that you don't want to run this inside. It's not to be in a closed environment. You need either very good ventilation or just have it outside. They're saying just have it outside. They're covering, their bases. Okay, so we'll go over this when I actually start it. That's telling you to keep it out. I'll mention this again about the vent. Okay, so we got our filler cap, we got our gas gauge, and we got our vent. The vent goes to, the vent is a line, goes through this frame, comes down here. The vent is being fed right into the air filter box. So I just want to show that. The vent is going inside the air filter box. So I believe what they're trying to do here is that any fumes that are coming off the top are going to accumulate, they're going to go down, and it will be sucked up by the vacuum of the engine. It will be pulled in by the vacuum into the carburetor. I'm in Arizona, it gets very hot. Gas quickly will turn to shellac. Literally, if you're familiar with the term shellac, it's used kind of like a varnish or a paint, and it's very thick and it's very gooey. Gasoline, after evaporation, leaves a residue, which I think technically is shellac. If it's not, it's very similar to shellac. So that's the point, that if you leave gas in a system for a long time, whether it's transported or not, it's going to turn to shellac. And then you're going to have to clean out all the lines, you'll have to clean out the carburetor. A lot of people just go ahead and buy a new carburetor. Now we have our wire for our spark plug. I do like this. I can tell you that already, I'm impressed, because the ignition wire, and there's only one, it's a single cylinder, and I don't even want to mess with it too much, but if it comes off easy, is metallic. And I can tell you that's a big deal. It's metallic. See that? This is really important. It's, I'm not saying it's heavy metal, obviously it's not, but it's made out of tin. And that's important, because not only that will suppress EMP, electromagnetic pulse, so you're going to have less disturbance to like radio waves and things like that, but it also serves to concentrate the spark better. Like, in other words, it's a shield. It keeps it tighter. Yeah, I believe I can check it later. I obviously don't want to pull it out unnecessarily, but it's a NGK, which is a good spark plug. Also, I notice when I'm putting this in, it's going into the block. It's not just sitting on the base of the plug. It's actually got a sleeve. It's going over the base of the plug, and it's going down into the block, which is nice. Again, it's that shielding thing. Right now it's incorporated with the block, and that's important to understand, because now you have negative shield with positive flow right there. That's very valuable to understand. If it were plastic, you couldn't do that. Okay, a couple little things I notice here. This would be your choke. Typically, they may instruct me differently, but I'm going to say, yes, that's the way they have it right here. They're not making you guess. All the way to your right, to the right, is going to be the on position. On means engine cold, your first attempt to start it, or when you start it for that day or that session. Let's say a few hours have passed from the last time it ran. So that would be on position. Then neutral is going to be in the middle. Now that is going to be your run. In other words, you put it, once it's warmed up, you're going to run it. Okay, you'll know, because the engine will start to, choke. And then you open up the choke slowly, and then it'll find its happy spot, right? It'll be running with quiescence or in balance. It won't be sputtering, it won't be jumping. Then you're going to open it to the middle position. Get the, we will do this. It's going to be really more to start off the setup. I'll remove the brackets. We're still in the unboxing, which is almost complete. We know we need oil, so I'll get the oil and bring it out. I got Pennzoil because I like Pennzoil, but it's your discretion. They call for 30 weight motor oil, but when you shop for motor oil these days, it's always a range. I'm never comfortable with zero. Now, apparently newer cars, for some reason, they want that 0 weight, full synthetic. That's what people swear by. And people claim they have all kinds of studies to show that, Mobil 1, 0 to 20 is the best. I'm not going to debate that. I just know that for these engines, standard 30 weight motor oil is what they recommend, and you would be more than adequate to just get standard 30 weight motor oil by a reputable brand. Castrol, Quaker State, Pennzoil, Mobil, You know, if you get their 30 weight standard motor oil, this will be fine. And I will indicate in this video, the unboxing, how you put the oil in, but I'm going to do it during the setup. Okay, so here, this is our standard 120 volt output. They give you 2 outlets. This is pretty much this interface panel is pretty much a standard. In fact, I've seen it on another generator. I did a review on a generator, had the exact same setup, but of course there's different silk screening and maybe the lights are slightly different. But this is pretty much a standard. This is your 12 volt output. Now that's going to be for, you know, a cigarette lighter or a cigarette lighter style plug-in. And I don't like those because I can tell you if you use them, you've had trouble with them because they have the little positive bowl that sticks out has a spring, and usually in there's a fuse, and inevitably that fuse will blow and you don't know it, and it's very aggravating, and you're on the road and you can't get to it and nobody knows how to do it, or nobody has a spare, obviously. So you basically think the thing's broken, then you think your device is broken, then you realize they're a mess. Why they use it, I don't know. I mean, I guess they're still popular. I have 12 volt out. All right, DC overload, which is basically a breaker, right? They're calling it overload, like you overloaded it in a pop. Well, that's a breaker, right? You overloaded the circuit. This thing's going to pop, and it's going to open the circuit. And so it's going to be off until you reset this. And those can be very aggravating. I could tell already, you're not going to get good 12 volt performance here. I can tell you right away. I don't even have to test it. I already know. You're not going to get good 12 volt performance. If you're just attempting to charge or even trickle charge a car battery, go ahead. But you're not going to jump start. You're not going to, you know, run high powered lights. You're not even going to run a 12 volt refrigerator. You're not going to do anything with this thing except have it there. I don't hook up to them, by the way. I don't use. I'm into electronics. I've been into, you know, power systems for a long time, even professionally. And I could tell you, based on my knowledge, you don't even use this thing. I mean, it's there. I got a good example for you. Maybe you have an auxiliary fan, you know, a 12 volt fan like a trucker fan, and it's a super hot day and you want to put the clip fan on right here and you want to help cool the motor. That's a good application. It'll give you, you know, a few amps to power a fan, something like that. Okay, so here we have a reset. Now I'm going to assume that this is the master reset. You know, this is the 12 volt over, and this is the generator, but it says 1. So I'm thinking this is 1, this is 2. Oh yeah, and this of course is the style that they use in RV parks, right? It's the RV plug. Now whether or not it's a 30 amp or not, I don't know. But it's the style of the 30 amp that you'd find in an RV park. And then of course this is your ground nut. Now I've often gotten into grounds with people, and a lot of people just don't use it, and that's good for them. But I could tell you, if available, and even if you have something that's like a ground, hook it up. Get a copper cable and just put it in this and close it. And don't even ask why. Don't even look back. Just, if you can do it, do it. If you have a nice long steel fence or metal fence, get a wire, even jumper cables from your car, hook it to the fence, hook it to this. Because you do want a ground. Ground is critical for noise elimination and also just helps the system run better. Because if it has excess current flow, it can dissipate it, and it dissipates it to the earth. The earth is there as your helper, right? And it will take excess voltage. If you have excess pulses, or let's say overcurrent, it has nowhere to go because there's no load. So it's acting havoc on everything. If you have it to earth, it has a place to go that goes to earth. So that's the important part of earth. If you can do it, do it. And you know, typically earth is a 8-foot copper rod into the ground directly, straight into the ground, 8 feet, which is not as easy as it sounds depending on your soil. Now, it's not all copper. It's actually a steel rod that's copper clad or copper coated, and they have devices to help you put it in. The rod itself is not that expensive. Home Depot has them for about $30. Standard 110 plugs. Obviously, you can split these. It's clearly ready to handle 15 amp. So just look at this like it's at home. Look at it like you're in the well, your bathroom might have a GFI. This does not have a GFI. Your bedroom or your living room or, you know, your den has an outlet. This is the same thing. It could probably handle up to 20 amp, but it's rated at 15 amp, and there's 2 of them. Now, are you going to have a distribution strip? power strip? Yeah, most definitely. You're going to hook this to a power strip, and that's fine. But we'll talk about the importance of not overloading. For this, when you get a power strip, you may want to consider have one with surge protection and have one obviously that has a breaker. The breaker is critical, right? Like if you overload, it's going to cut off. But you have to think of it the other way. If this spikes for any reason, is it going to damage your equipment? And that's where a overload protecting circuit will sense the overvoltage and it will cut it out as well. Sometimes, fancy ones will put a light on, and then you can even get battery backup if you want. If this thing went out, you'd have battery backup. But that's not here nor there for this discussion. Okay, so what else do we have? We have our engine switch. Okay, this is cool because it's just a switch, but I like the way they put it in plastic. I wouldn't recommend running this unit in the rain, but obviously you're going to have inclement weather. Whether it was forecasted or not, it doesn't matter. This thing's going to be outside most of the time, and it's going to get wet, and they have a plastic cover for that purpose. This one is Echo. Now Echo's interesting because if you're really like trying to save gas, if you're not, let's say you're just powering a computer, maybe a night light, maybe you have like one other device, a small fan, and you're not really demanding, then go ahead, put it on Echo. Just put it up. Turn the Echo up means on, or a slash or a 1 means on. 0 means that the Echo system is off, or it means not employed, right? You're not employing the Echo system. So 0 is non-Echo, 1 is Echo. For the purposes of this video, when I do the setup, you want to be in the 0 position. You don't want Echo on because you want all the faculty of the system to fire up at once because you're setting it up, obviously. And then whether or not you're going to employ a break-in period, that's up to you. I always do, and I always do my break-in period the first tank of gas, and I will not operate the machine beyond half its limit. So let's say it's rated at 4,000, right? If you're rated at 4,000, I will not, for the first tank of gas, operate above 2,000. Let's say I'll limit it to 2,000, and then I'll run a whole tank of gas. Now I could just run it to run it, or I could just get use of it. And then what I'm going to do is stop when it runs out of gas. I'm going to drain the oil, and I'm going to look at the oil. I'm going to let it cool, and I'm going to put my fingers in it, and I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to see, is there any metallic substance? You can even take a magnet. Is there anything in there to indicate to you that the engine is not running completely optimally? And it'll also tell you if you've got the oil level right. Did enough oil come out? Did enough oil go in? It'll give you an idea of what an oil change is. And oil's expensive, but it's still inexpensive enough to just don't worry about it. Go use the oil for something else, your lawnmower or whatever, if you think it's still good. But don't put it back in. Get new oil, fresh oil, and put it in, and then you're good to go. That's my recommendation. You don't have to do it. Many people don't do it, and they live just fine. So that's just me, because I want it to last. That's my point. Or the other point is, if there's something wrong with it, I want to know right away. I don't want to wait for a month and then say, oh, I'm beyond my return privilege or whatever. I want to find out immediately, because if I find shavings in that oil, I'm going to contact them immediately and just explain what happened. It's just, I'm looking at the oil and something inside is not right. It doesn't sound right. I got metal shavings. I want to return it. Now, the return policy is very strict because you can't ship something with gas or oil in it. But I would explain to them. I would meticulously drain it, and then I would make sure absolutely no gas. But I would explain what went wrong. Or they could say keep it, and they'll maybe negotiate a deal on a new one with you. If you have reasons, you document, take a couple pictures, take your cell phone out, show the filing, show what you did, the process. We've been through this, overhead valve. We talked about the breather. We talked about the PVC. Talked about the really nice muffler. And then we noticed the cover for the muffler, which is nice. It seems really heavy duty. I like these big, thick barrel types. You can see they purposefully brought it down here to kind of contain it. And that also indicates that it's going to buffer the sound a little bit, other than like a straight, cherry bomb style muffler. Okay, and then they have the spark arrestor on the end. That's just a little screen to keep sparks from flying out. I don't think they would, because you're making a bend. It's not in line, but just for protection, they put that on there, which is good. It's prudent. And we'll take a look at it. It's a standard. You use this to gauge where you are in your oil. The idea is to fill it. Now this is why I know this is interesting. I could see that there was oil in the engine, and they said that they started this engine and they had to have oil in it to run it. So it did have oil in it, but they did not ship it with oil because shippers don't want to have oil spilling all over their their loading docks or their facility. So they drain the oil meticulously so that they could ship it. And I could tell you that I'm impressed because this definitely shows that they had it filled with oil, they tested it, and then they put it back in. A lot of times you will see you get a new generator, it's never been touched. They assembled it and they shipped it, and they just hope it's going to work. Now, a lot of times, 99% of the time it will work because it's, the design specifications are such. It's a small engine. It's not a rocket engine, let's say. But the point is that, it's nice to know that they went through the quality step and that there's a quality control. In fact, that's what this stamp is, I believe. I think that's what this is. I'd have to interpret it further. I'm kind of guessing, but this would be after the person did the oil and checked it, they stamped it. Now, it could also mean that there's no oil in it, like it could be part of the process. It's on an assembly line. They filled it, they started it, and then when it was ready to go, maybe they put that on. Or that could be that the quality control person signed off on it by stamping it. They tried to hide the serial number. So do record your serial number, by the way. I mean, that may sound like, too much, but no, it's there. Take a picture of it and just put it in your Google Docs or whatever, just have it, because if it does get stolen, at least you have A, proof that it was yours, B, you have the serial number. And the serial number is unique. There's only one. This engine has one number and one number only, and no other engine has it. So that's kind of good in a way. Everything looks tight. I mean, they warned me a couple times to take the bracket off, which I'll do. I'll just get a nut driver and I'll get those off. As you know, I'm going to remove the recoil because I'm going to start it with a power drill, and I'll show you how I do that. And I recommend it, actually. Now they may not recommend it, so I'm on somewhat thin ice there. I know it works. I know it works well. It's a good, inexpensive way to have a electric start. And pull start is not a problem unless there's a problem. Then pull start is unacceptable, in my opinion. Are you following me on that? I'll explain it again, because pull start is a really good, effective way to start an engine when the engine is running fine. Like now, it should start right up, maybe first or second pull, no question. However, let's say there was a damp condition, rain, let's say you got some bad gas, let's say one of anything, that the engine's just not quite running right. Now you're sitting there pulling and pulling and pulling, perhaps in the middle of the night. You're in your sweats or your underwear and you're sitting there pulling and pulling, and you don't even know if it's going to start or not. It's the most frustrating, exasperating experience you'll ever have, sitting there pulling a small engine. Not that it's hard. It's just that the continuation of pull it again, and pull it like you want to start it every time. It's nasty, and it really can wear you down. Air-cooled 208. And so it's a 208 cc engine. So, and it's just as gasoline. You're not going to run propane in this. You're not going to run diesel. It's regular gasoline. It's your choice. I would recommend premium because the cost difference, if you're paying an extra $1 a gallon for premium, it's well worth it for the small engine. You're going to have a lot less headaches than if you run regular. Now, I'm not saying you can't run regular. A lot of people do. I think today it's 97 octane versus, let's say, 99 octane. But I can tell you for a fact, premium will help it run better. It will help it last longer, and you'll just have a better experience if you just look at it like it needs premium. And the good news is that it's not taking that much gas. You're not filling a 22-gallon tank. In fact, you're only filling a 2.5? I forget what it is. I'll have to read the spec. I think it's a 2.5. I'll verify that by the end of the video. In fact, I'll cover everything again spec-wise. Right at the end of the video, you'll have a chart. Now, I'm interested in what this thing is. This was this little kind of breather filler cap. I'm wondering if, and I'm sure I could find material involved, but you really shouldn't have these mysteries, right? I mean, why would you have a mystery? Could it be for this? I don't know for a fact. I'm going to see it in the literature, but I got to say, this is a little flaky. I'm impressed to this point. Now I'm really wondering what's going on with this. Because A, you're right by the exhaust system, so this plastic could potentially melt. Although if you kept it out like that, it could just simply serve as a breather. But I really don't know. I mean, I would have to look at what they want this thing to do. And it was just laying in the box, incidentally. It did, you saw that when I opened it. It was just laying in the box. So it is a bit of a mystery. I've never seen that before. Okay, so back to here. Remove the bracket. I'm just going to read off the specs real quick, and then we'll conclude this video and I'll go into the setup. Oh yeah, I'll open the bag first. And I could probably find in the manual what that breather tube is. Okay, so they're saying, I'll just read these off. The rated power is 3.2 kilowatt. It's at 120 volt. That's important. It's not 110, not 115, it's 120. Okay, the rated current is 26.7 amp. Now remember I was saying, I knew it was more than 15, and I was saying it's probably more than 20, but there's your answer, it's 28.7. That's important to know because it's not 30. Okay, this plug, that's why they're mentioning it, this plug is typically for a 30 amp service, but they're telling you right here, it is not 30 amp service. Okay, please understand that. You're using a plug that's for 30 amp service, but you're not getting 30 amp service. So this is not an RV park with a plug-in with a utility. It's less than that. Now, it's not significantly less than that. It's probably similar to, but they're telling you flat out it's not. It's, you know, almost let's say 3.3 amp short of being a 30 amp circuit. Okay, the frequency is always 60 hertz. That's North America, all over, even Mexico, which is part of North America. I guess most of South America as well. 60. I know some countries use 50. That's why I mentioned that. Okay, power factor is 1. Okay, so they're just multiply everything by 1, which means it is what it is. Okay, and then rated speed, they're saying in RPM is 3,600 RPM. That would be like normal, you know, how fast the flywheel's spinning. And then they're saying ambient temperature should operate within -5 to 40, and that's in Celsius. Okay, so you're talking 5 degrees below freezing, and you're talking pretty hot, because I know like 22 is like close to 70, or that would be room temperature, and they're saying double that. So it can get pretty hot, and will get hot. Number of phases, single. It's a single phase. In other words, it's not like for 220 where you're going to have multi-phase. It's a single phase. What you see is what you get. It's just, think of it this way. It does this. Simply put, I'm laughing because it's kind of funny. It's simplistic but funny. This thing is meant to do this. It's not really meant to do this, and it's not meant to do this. That we know. It's meant to do this. Look at it that way. And that's in the manual, but it probably indicates that it's shut off, that you have low oil, and it killed the engine. And basically it's an oil sensor that just grounds the spark plug. It just basically doesn't allow ignition when the oil is low. It's that simple. And if, oh, incidentally, if you disconnect it, it's open and it will run. It's not a supervised system. In other words, if you cut the wire, it will run even if it has no oil until it seizes. So remember that. You know, it's not telling you it's absolutely guaranteed. It's just there to help you. If the oil runs low, it'll cut the engine off. I'm one of those guys, I don't keep the manuals, but I can tell you I definitely read them, because you'd be surprised, even though if it seems overly simplistic, like a lot of this stuff is obvious. You know, they're saying stay away from the house, they're saying don't pour gas in when it's hot. I've put gas in hot generators my whole life and I've never had a problem, but I'm not telling important. Recoil starter, they get into that. They get the fuel valve position. Ground terminal, they cover all of that. I want to know, I'm trying to find, they talk about using a power strip, they talk about the different devices and how you should have used in high altitude areas. That's interesting. I'm at about 3,200 feet right now, and that's where this thing will run. So that's moderate. You can't consider that high altitude, but then again, it's not sea level. So I notice with my engines that, yeah, you can feel a little bit, but not significant enough to call it high altitude. But if you are up on a mountain peak somewhere, yes, read the section about high altitude, because you may have to adjust the jets and the carburetor. Altitude changes a lot. What is it? 7,000 feet in elevation is roughly like moving 2,000 miles north. So that's what I heard from a park ranger one time. 7,000 feet in elevation going up a mountain is like traveling at, let's say, sea level 2,000 miles towards Canada for us in the United States. Okay, so spark plug. All right, I don't see anything about that. So I may even contact them and just say, look, even though I'll have it running well before they get back to me, I will make them aware of the fact that I'm unhappy because I open the box and there's this plastic thing bouncing around, and I honestly don't know where this thing goes. Now, it could be to help you put oil in, but then they gave us a funnel too. So I don't know. The funnel should suffice, but I do notice that you may not get the funnel in there, right? Like if you put the funnel in here, it's going to be like here, and you're going to have to tilt it, and you're going to have oil running all over. So this just may help you get oil in it. So you take this off. This is what I'm hoping it is, okay? You take that out, and you jam this in there. Now you have a place to put the funnel. But I'm not seeing that either because the funnel hole is different. Like it'll go over, but you don't want it to go over it. You want it to go in it. So I don't know what this thing is. I really don't. Like if I did this, the oil would be spilling. So that's not good. I don't really know what this does. And that's kind of bothering me because I don't want an open hole in the crankcase. Right? I mean, that is significant, and that should kind of be in bold on the front, actually. You should say, should you find this thing flying around inside the box, this is what you need to do. For spark plug remover. Because a lot of times these spark plugs on smaller engines, they're kind of unique in the not unique in themselves, but they're different than, let's say, automotive or car or truck spark plugs in size. So at least they give you that. Now you could say, well, how do you turn that, right? And what they're expecting you to do is put the screwdriver through the hole, and then you turn it like this. That's what they're expecting, right? Now, they probably mention it, but that's what they expect you to do. Because there's no other thing in here, right? There's no bar or anything to do that, I don't think, right now. Okay, so we got this, and I'm thinking, okay, so that's the filler. Okay, as we get near the conclusion of our unboxing video, I have a few more things to cover, and then we will get into the setup of the generator inverter. This mystery piece, incidentally, was part of the funnel. I found out that this would clip roughly into the bottom of the funnel, and then you would have a little bit of an angle so you could put your oil in. It was indeed part of the funnel. It became separated in the box, and this thing was bouncing around. It had me a little bit confused because I didn't at first see how exactly it would fit into the funnel. So if you're going to use the funnel supplied, then you would certainly want to use this. I'm not going to use this. I have a different funnel that I'll use. And I have the oil ready, so we'll jump right in and let's take care of the oil first. We have the bracket to remove. You'll recall that this tag reminds us that we have to remove the brackets, and there's two of them on each side of the engine. And what it does is it secures the engine down to the frame for shipping. Once we take these off, it will depend on the rubber motor mounts for support, which will help with vibration or any problems that the engine might have once we release the brackets. Okay, so I'm going to release this tag. And we will get right into the oil. Now the oil is very straightforward. You just remove the oil filler cap. And the idea here is you're going to fill this until you can't fill it anymore at level before the oil would start to drip out on its own. And you want to be careful that you're not just dripping oil out of the funnel, obviously, that you're going to fill it as much as you can before the oil would naturally pour out when the generator is on a level surface. So I had a level, and we're at a fairly decent level surface right now. Or let's say just good enough to put oil in. Okay, so I'm just going to insert my funnel like this because of the top, and there's just simply not enough space. So you're going to need some kind of a funnel. Now, as I said, they supplied the funnel. They had the attachment that came off in the box and had me a little confused. No big deal there. Okay, so I like Pennzoil 1030. Again, I'm going to employ a break-in period, so this might be a little bit different than the way you're going to do it. I intend to drain this oil after the first tank full of gasoline. I'm going to put a full tank of gas. I'm going to run it on half load, roughly less than 2,000 watt demand, and I'm going to let the whole tank run through, and then I'm going to drain the oil again. Now, you'll recall that there's two different ways, basically. Their recommended way would be to simply remove this bolt or oil drain plug, which I guess is the preferred way. However, you really don't need to. You can just tilt the whole frame and just let the oil pour out of the input, or let's say the oil filler area. You could use this for a drain as well, which is what I do. And if there's a little oil left over, that's fine. I don't have a big concern over that. So again, we're going to put as much oil in as it would take until it would start to pour out. And I can tell you there's a measurement on this Pennzoil container, so I'll let you know roughly how much oil I had to put in. I'm going to assume a lot of these engines are based on 1 quart, but I'm going to check. It could be less than 1 quart, but not significantly less. Okay, so we're to the point now where I can see the oil level, and it's not quite dripping. Of course, it's dripping off the funnel, but it's not quite dripping out of the oil filler area. So I'm going to put a little more in, and this should just about do it. Okay, that's it right there. Now, do you see the way, if you can get a look at that, you'll see the way the oil is starting to drip out at level. See it right there? The oil is right on the edge. In fact, if I were to tilt it a little bit, you would see how it's pouring out. It's right on the edge. That indicates that the oil is full, that the crankcase has significant oil to proceed. So then I'm just going to simply close it up. And that's a good design if you think about it, because I know there's a dipstick here, but dipsticks are kind of hard to decipher sometimes, you know, where the oil is actually on the dipstick, and if you're seeing it, and, you know, with good clean oil today, sometimes it's hard to see where exactly the line would be on the dipstick. So that's your good indication. You can take that out. You want the oil to be right on the edge, where if you were to add a little oil, it would drip out, but not significantly down into the crankcase where there's where you can't see it visibly on the edge. Okay, now the next thing we'll take care of very quickly. We're going to take off the 2 brackets. They're not in, incidentally, they're not in very tight at all this time. I haven't removed them before, and this drill is hardly working. This is a standard Craftsman 20 volt 1/4 inch impact driver. Later, when I start the engine, I'm going to use a power drill. It's not going to be the impact driver. It's going to be a separate power drill. Okay, so that's our first brackets off. And not that I plan on shipping this engine, but it's a nice little bracket, so I'm going to keep this to see if I need it for something else down the road. And I'll keep the bolts as well. They did a pretty good job on that, by the way. I thought this is fairly robust, and these are pretty good quality bolts that held it in. So now I'm going to flip it around. We know our oil is good to go, so we got that out of the way. We'll move this over. Get this out of the way. Now we're going to flip it around. Okay, and then we have another one down in here. This one's a little harder to get to, and don't miss it because it's underneath the formidable exhaust or muffler here, which I like the big muffler. This unit's supposed to run pretty quiet, so I'm really anxious to see exactly how quiet this thing's going to be. So let's pull this out. I got to get that a little deeper. Not a big deal there. If I have to, I can use the power drill. In fact, I'm going to go... What I did is I took it from high speed to low speed, higher torque, and then I was able to pull it right off. Okay, so here's our two brackets that we took off. I'm going to save these to see if I can use them down the road. Most likely I'll never use them again on this generator. Okay, so we see now that the engine is free on its motor mounts, and there's quite a bit of play there, I have to say. I guess they want that for dampening, right? You can really see the shift there. That's why they did not ship it without the brackets, because this would be too much play inside freight, you know, to get bounced around too much. So you can really see that. Okay, now I'm just going to do a quick preliminary check all around just to make sure that there isn't something here that we should pick up on. So I'll just do this quickly. We took this off to show you earlier. This is the ignition wire. I'm making sure that it's firm all the way down and making contact. That's important. Obviously, you can't start without your spark plug connected properly. The spark plug, it looked like it was an NGK. It was in position, ready to go. These are tight. I haven't touched them. This is the overhead valve. I talked to you about the significance of this. All right, the oil filter, we did check. I was making sure that it was not covered in plastic, which it is not. We could simply use the recoil start now. We have oil in it, and the recoil start is more than adequate in terms of starting the engine. However, for video purposes, I'm going to remove the recoil, and I'm going to show you how you can start with a common power drill. All right, over here, we're going to do our quick start guide. It's on the other side. However, we're just going to make sure that our number one switch is on the on position. On is up. There's a cover plastic. You have a 0 and a 1. On is number 1. Echo, I'm going to leave off. That's economy. I'm going to leave it off. I could switch it on. I'll test it later. However, we'll keep that off because I want the whole system to fire up. Reset is down. DC 12 volt, nothing in it. I just made sure that AC overload 1, DC overload number 2 is all set. And then I don't have a ground connected, although I do plan on incorporating a ground. And just to recap, this would be your RV 30 amp type socket. That would be 120 volts at 30 amps. But you'll recall that the unit does not provide 30 amps. It provides short of that. Not a lot, but it doesn't provide 30. But it can easily supply 15, so that's our common household outlet that we're going to use, and they give you 2. Now, you're not going to want to put a load on to start the engine. That's important to understand. You don't ever really want to load. It makes it harder to start, and it can confuse the electronics. In other words, you want the electronics to come up to speed and produce the voltage before you plug into it. And it's not critical, but it just helps the system overall. Here are the couple warnings. I'll go ahead and read the warnings just so that we're clear on that. Check make sure there's no fuel spilling. I haven't put gasoline in yet. Let the generator cool before storing it. If you're going to put it away after use, make sure you let it cool. And that's true with anything. Don't move it if it's super hot. Just for your own safety, right? You don't want to burn yourself. Just let it cool down. And it takes a while to cool down. Give it 5, 10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes before you handle it. Exhaust gas is poisonous. They covered that 3 times already. Do not connect to a building electrical system. Okay, don't put this in. It's not made to hook into an electrical panel. If you have a reverse meter or anything like that, do not use this. You're not to put this in your household system or, you know, industrial system. Do not expose the generator to rain, moisture, or snow. Now, obviously, rain is unavoidable, right? You're going to have a rainstorm crop up. But what I like to do for Arizona, I always have it covered because I want it in the shade anyway. And that cover is usually enough to keep it from downpour. However, you know, if it's raining, there's water, moisture all over the place. So, and plus you have plastic on the switches. So you could say, if you're not to operate at moisture, why did you cover the switch? And I think that's pretty obvious, that you're going to use it at times where you're going to have moisture and potential splashing. So I think that's okay. But don't keep it in direct rain or snow. Read the operator's instruction manual, okay, which we had out before. I don't have it with me right now, but I read it completely, and there was really no significant information. Although there was some lack of information, which I'll get into in a little bit, which is going to probably give this a 4-star, by the way, just based on the lack of information. And I'll explain that later. I want to point out your carburetor looks good. Everything's tight. There's the choke control. I want to mention this piece right here, that you have from the bowl of the carburetor, you have a screw. If you're going to move it or store it, you can drain the bowl through this tube right here, and you do so by opening that screw. As I mentioned, there's a float in there. If it has gas, it closes the valve. If it opens, it lets gas in and fills this bowl before it's taken up and into the engine. If you're going to move it, you don't want gas sitting in there. It's probably the #1 reason why floats start to stick, is that gas was kept in there. It turns to shellac and it makes the float stick. So what they're doing here is they're giving you a way to vacate the bowl. And it's this screw here, and it's this little tube. You'd put a pan under here, whatever, a cup, open this up, and it'll drain the bowl. The volume of gas will be very small, maybe 1/4 of a cup at best. It'd be very small. Okay, so again, I like the exhaust system. It looks like it's a pretty good unit, but as I mentioned, they conveniently left out one piece of critical information, which I can get into after this video. Before I do the startup, what I'll do is explain why I'm having a concern. Okay, so I just want to cover this one more time. To start, oil, we just did. Gas, we're going to do. On, right, that's going to be here. We're going to move that choke lever all the way to the right, okay? Now, as far as the gas valve is concerned, we move that to the down position, right? This way is off, this way is down, or it actually goes like this. This way is off, this way is on. And that's true for all industrial valves, gas valves, water valves, any valve. That if it has a lever, usually if you cross plane the tube, it's going to be off. If you're with the tube, it's going to be on, or allow it to flow. That's the way to look at it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the recoil, just because I want to show you that in the unboxing setup. Now, this is not even necessarily recommended. It's just something that I do because I don't like pulling recoils. Earlier, that with a recoil, everything should be just fine. You're fine with the recoil. I could see you just totally keeping it the way it is and using it. When the engine has a potential problem, let's say there's moisture, bad gas, for whatever reason it's not starting, I find recoils extremely exacerbating. They're extremely frustrating to sit there and pull a recoil time and time again when the engine's not starting. It's not a good way to isolate a potential problem like a fuel clog, a carburetor, a fuel filter. With a power drill, you can more or less keep the power drill on, keep the engine cranking, and potentially with your left arm work on little things. You know, it's not like you're going to tear the engine apart, but you'll be able to work on little things. You know, check the valve, check to see if there's a clog. You can do little things, maybe tap it a little bit to make sure gas is flowing. Maybe you could put your hand on the valve cover to see that there's no potential problem there. So that's why I like to get rid of the recoil. Now, I'll keep the recoil. If I were to sell this down the road, or even if I had to return it, obviously the recoil would go back on. Incidentally, these are the same size and look almost like the exact same bolts that held the brackets on. So that's something you may want to note, that they were pretty good quality. I guess if they felt good enough about them to put the recoil on with them, I guess they used them for. I mentioned that because theoretically you would be throwing these away, right? Or you wouldn't use them again. But they did at least use quality. These they're the same length, I believe, too. Yeah, they're the exact same bolt, which I find surprising, but I'll keep them here because I want to keep these all together with the recoil. Most likely what I'll do is I'll put them all in a clear plastic bag, wrap it up, put a zip tie on it, and then I'll just put it into storage so I have it available. Okay, so there we have it. Now this is good because I believe it's going to help airflow, because obviously this is open now, so it can take more air. And then of course you have your flywheel, and the flywheel has little fins on it, right, or little fan blades. As it spins, it's going to grab air, create a vortex, and it's going to suck in the air to help cool the engine. But I'm finding this out real time. Usually there's a nut on the end that you would take a socket and you would grab onto it. Then you would put your power drill on. There is no nut. What they have in here are 2 bolts, and they have Allen screw tops on them, or Allen, tops. So I'd go in with an Allen wrench, take this off. But I'm thinking I don't want to take it off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a special rig, and that rig is going to be like a T between here, and then I'm going to have a shaft, and that's the way I'm going to turn the crank. Now I have to be careful because I don't want it sticking out too far, because this thing's going to be whipping around. It's got to be short, but yet it should be fairly tight, and it's got to be precisely in the middle. Now if you're not going to want electric start, if you're not going to use the power drill, just ignore this whole section. However, for me it's important because I really want to be able to start this thing with a power drill. Your generator with a power drill. I don't like recoils, and recoils are just fine if the engine's running properly. Where I have a problem with recoils, if the engine has difficulty starting, you find yourself pulling and pulling and pulling your recoil, hoping to start the engine, and obviously if it doesn't start, it can become quite frustrating very quickly, especially if you're trying to troubleshoot at the same time. So what I've done is I set up adapters so I can start the engine using a common power drill. Now this is a Craftsman brushed power drill. It's a common 20 volt design. I have a 6 amp hour battery, which is pretty hefty, and there's nothing special about it. It's not the brushless, it's just a brushed regular power drill from Craftsman, which is middle of the road. It's not cheesy, but it's not the best. It's not as good as Milwaukee, but it's better than Black & Decker. So I like Craftsman. It's a good medium price point and quality point. So I want to point out that I've never seen an engine turn counterclockwise, a small engine, single cylinder, 4-stroke that turned counterclockwise at the recoil. All the ones I've seen turn clockwise. Okay, so the basic premise here is that your power drill is going to turn clockwise, and we're going to turn the crank. Now I have this down in the low speed, high torque mode. This is the higher speed. So we're going to be able to, spin it relatively quickly to get the engine started. Now, on this particular engine, I've noticed right away that there is no nut at the end of the crankshaft. There's usually a big nut that sits in there that we would just simply get a socket, fit it on the nut, attach it to the power drill, and we just simply spin it. For some reason, they elected not to do that. I don't want to take it apart because I have a feeling that it all is clamped or held down by these 2 bolts that they have in there that have Allen wrench tops. There's 2 of them. There's one there and there, and then they have 3 holes. So rather than mess with that, I'm just going to using my spare parts box or my bolt box, which I know everybody has, I'm going to make a makeshift way to spin that crank. Now, it's got to be durable and it's got to be relatively tight in the respect that it can't have too much overhang, because remember, when the engine starts, this thing's going to be spinning around. So you don't want, you know, things way out here, and you don't want too long this way. Everything's got to be relatively snug. So this is what I came up with. I'm doing this real time. I haven't tried it before. It's impromptu. So I'm just going to simply put this on. Now, this is a common brass coupler for grounding on electronics, but these are pretty durable. Sometimes I'll use these to clamp down on a battery post. Not for a car, but for any other application where you have a car battery and you want to attach a wire. I use one of these. They're pretty handy. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to attach it in like that. Then I'm going to close this off, tighten it. All right. It's going to go like this. Tighten it all the way against this. And then I'm going to, and thank goodness it's clockwise, so I'm going to just simply spin it clockwise, and it's going to turn everything clockwise. And it just so happens, why I say thank goodness, is that that's tightening. As I spin that way, this will tighten. As compared to loosen, that could be a bit of a problem. But what I'm going to do, I want the big bolt in here. I want something solid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill out just a little section here so I can fit this through. And it should go relatively easily. I'm not worried about it, but obviously it's going to void any warranty or anything that you may have. That should be enough. And incidentally, that was relatively soft. That went right through. It's more tin than anything else, I guess. And I'm going to continue to turn. When you turn the crank, don't go in the opposite direction. You should keep it in its direction, which is clockwise. But keep in mind, that's counterclockwise on the crank side. Just a reminder of that. So when you read about engine specs, it'll say crank, or it'll say counterclockwise, because they're stating it from the other side. They're not going to typically give you the spec from the recoil side. They're going to give you the spec from where you're going to attach an appliance, or you're going to attach a generator, you're going to put a pulley on, you're going to put a clutch on, whatever they're telling you from the other side. Crankshaft, I want to say. They're telling you from if they're saying counterclockwise, they're talking about the crankshaft, and they're talking about on the other side. And then they'll give you the dimension. Generators use sometimes what they call a tapered shaft, which is unique to generators. A tapered shaft is actually similar to this, but not quite as extreme, and that's so it can better fit into the generator portion itself. So that should do it right there. Now I'm going to just slip this through. That was nice and easy. Okay, that's what's going to give me the ability to be able to turn this through, right? You understand the concept now. I'm going to turn that around. I did want to consider putting a washer in. However, this is pretty tight. So I think I may just go as is. And that way, because I want to make sure that I can get at least one full nut width on there. If I put washers on, I might fall short of that. Okay, so I'm going to be able to do that. Now what I want to do, because I am worried about this flying off, because remember it's going to be spinning and possibly vibrating. So what I want to do is put a little thread locker on this. And as you know, the red thread locker is the permanent. But it's not permanent, it's just, you can get it off if you have to. It's just, it's the stronger of the three compared to blue, and then sometimes they have another one. This is running a little bit low, but I'll be able to get some out of there. It doesn't take a lot of thread locker, by the way. You're not supposed to drench it in thread locker. You just put a little bit on the threads. That's all it takes. And then you gauge it. You know, if this may come off again, so I don't want to put a real hefty amount. I just want to put a little bit just to hold it in place. Right, you see that? So it's nice and tight now. And I'm almost one complete nut width, but I will, when I crank it down, I will get it to that. Okay, now here's really the important part. Now I have a bolt that's going to fit into this, and I'm going to be able to crank down and it'll get tight. Then I have to center it, and that you could do it by eye. I mean, it's not the most critical thing, although you do want to try to get it as centered as possible, because on startup the RPMs are not maximum rotation. You're just really starting it. I mean, it's significant. You don't want a lot of wobble, but it can tolerate a little bit. Just a little bit, running low on that. So again, this is where I'm threading in. Right? I'm going to put it in the middle. Now this bolt that I'm putting in right now could theoretically be a little shorter, because I want, like I said earlier, I want it as close as possible. I don't want it sticking way out. So I'm going to try to center. I'm going to do it by eye. Go a little this way. I mean, you could take, you know, depending on how exact you want to make it, you could take other measurements. You could put some paper in there and fold it and make it across, or you can make your measurements much more exact. However, for my purposes, that's pretty good. Right? So I'm going to want to tighten this. I'm going to want to tighten that. And then I'm going to take the power drill. I'm going to take my little thing here, and then I'm going to turn this. Right? So you understand the concept. It's going to spin the crank. If you're relatively new to this kind of thing, the other approach, which I've done for other things, it would be an eye bolt. Right? You would just simply put it like that. Why I'm not using the eye bolt here is that there would be slop in between. In other words, you would have some slop in between the eye and the bolt. So I thought this would be better. Now the drawback is that this brass is relatively weak. It could theoretically bend or break or even snap off or twist off. But I'm not considering this a high torque application. It's a relatively high torque application, but it's not a very high torque application. So I think I should be okay. Now my first thing is going to be to tighten this up. Okay, so they have the quick start guide checklist. We'll go over that. I can tell you we're pretty much good to go. A tiny bit below full, but I don't, like I said, it's the break-in mode, so it doesn't have to be exactly full. I'm just running it to make sure there's no problems. Now we're going to do the checklist. The first thing is make sure engine oil, check. Gasoline, check. Gas valve on, check. Sticker on there to tell you the on position as well. Okay, the next one, choke. They want full choke. Okay, this is full choke position all the way to the right. There's a little sticker right here. They call it on. I wouldn't call it on. I would say full choke. Full choke is this way. That's right there. Okay, full choke. Now this, they just show partial. This in the middle would be partial choke. And then they call it off. But actually off is open. So there you have it. They're saying on to the right. Middle is partial choke, and full open they're calling off. I don't know why. That's all the way to the left. All right. One thing, this is optional. I could just try to start it now, and then you would better know the performance of this specific engine in terms of its startability, because I hope it really starts pretty quickly, especially consider I'm going to be doing a power start. However, I always like to put a little, give it a little help. It's its first time. So rather than cranking it needlessly, I'm just going to put a little bit of starter fluid on it. So we talked about this before. This is your filter element. This is just an air area. So it can grab air before it goes up through the filter. And I'm just going to take regular starting fluid, and I'm just going to saturate the sponge. And then I'll show you the procedure that I go through. Okay, so choke is on the on position. They remind you to put the switch on or up. So the switch is up. Then, oh, they're showing you once it's running, move the choke to the left. And then this, what is that telling me? Oh, then attach your power. Okay, so they're reminding you, don't put your power on yet. You're going to start it first, then you're going to plug in. And that is important. I could tell you that. You're much better off. I'm not saying you can't have your power plugged in, but it puts too much strain, initial strain on the motor when you're starting it. And there's no need to. I mean, just disconnect your power, start the engine, connect your power, in that order. Okay, so we're pretty much good to go. Very exciting moment. See how we can get this thing going. I'm just pulling this stuff off of here because the table will vibrate and I don't want unnecessary stuff flying around. One last confirmation just to show you this was the recoil. That's that on there. I'm going to look at it and I'm going to spin it. Right? Do you see how it's moving clockwise? Can you see that? So I'm going to be spinning this clockwise in the right direction. See it? Okay, so here we go. I was just making sure that they don't have anything else in there, like an insert or something. I don't see anything. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, they'll put plastic on the filter, so you want to make sure that you don't have any plastic on the filter. So I've never started this engine before. Let's see how well it does. Open the choke. Okay, that turned it off. Okay, we'll start it up again. I thought maybe it was choking a little bit. That's why I... That's pretty good. I would say that's running pretty good. And I haven't adjusted the audio, so I would say that goes up pretty quiet. So I'm pretty happy about that. So I'm glad I was able to rig this. As I said, more times than not, there's going to be a nut on this side of the crankshaft. And you could just fit a socket on there with a power drill, but this did not have one. So I was concerned at first, but then I was able to make this simple thing out of, I got it out of my used bolt box. So I know all of you at home, you have a bolt box. That's a guy thing. Every guy has a bolt box. That's where all your spare bolts, nuts and bolts go. Okay, here I'm going to be hooking in a light load when I start it up again. But there is something else I wanted to mention. This engine is based on the Honda design. Honda more or less came up with a single cylinder overhead valve design. And of course, Honda is, outstanding when it comes to their products, but they're very expensive. I want to talk to you quickly about the overhead valve. This is very important to understand. A lot of people don't get this about these overhead valve engines. This is going to require an adjustment. When you have a problem with the generator, most likely in order, it will be a fouled spark plug. You take the spark plug out, make sure that it's clean. You could buy a new one or clean the existing plug, put it back in, try it. If it still doesn't work, or if you feel like there's no compression or too much compression, either way, seems like it's too hard to start or it doesn't seem to have compression. Don't assume that it's the piston. It's not. It's one of the two valves. This is the exhaust valve over here underneath the cover. I'm not going to take the cover off because it's brand new. There's no reason to. This is the exhaust valve because it's on the side of the exhaust. This is the intake valve because it's on the side of the carburetor. You have two valves. And I'll post the graphic illustration so you understand. But a tool you're going to need to get, it's called a feeler gauge. And they're quite common. Most of you probably know or even have one. But it's a feeler gauge. In essence, these are feelers, and you're going to take the specific size. I don't know what these valves call for. Sometimes they're slightly different. Sometimes the exhaust side is slightly thicker or a heavier gauge than the intake side. So let's say intake is 0.02. The exhaust will be something like 0.03, maybe even 0.04. That is a ballpark. I'm not saying that's the exact measurement. I'm just giving you an example. But you're going to need to get a feeler gauge. You're going to remove these 4 bolts, engines off, and you're going to turn the crank by your hand, and you're going to find top dead center. Now, how do you do that? You can take a stick or something or a probe and put it into the cylinder and then wait for it to come to the top. Now, how do you know it's top? Is because it won't be pushed up anymore, right? Piston will come up, push, and then down. So when it's at its top, you stop turning it, and then you come over here and you take your feeler gauge and you get the spec for the valves and you put the feeler gauge into what they call the lash. The lash is where the rocker, and I'll show again the illustration, where the rocker hits the valve stem. It pushes the valve stem up and down, right, against the spring. So where that makes contact, you're going to put a feeler gauge in there because there needs to be a slight gap. And I do mean slight. It's, tissue paper thin. The last one I did was right in here to give you an idea. It's right about like super thin, like that thin. These can also be used for gapping spark plugs, by the way, although people don't really do that anymore. Or maybe they do, but I don't see it a lot. Spark plugs are cheap enough where you just go buy another one. But anyway, it's about that thin. And you put that into the lash, which would be this way, right, into the lash. And then you have an adjustment nut on the top, and you crank the top. It takes 2 wrenches. One wrench is for the loose and tighten of the thing itself, and then you have the tighten nut on top. So the bottom nut is freeing it up. Then the top nut, you make your adjustment. And then you have the feeler gauge in there. You snug it down. You remove it. Make sure both your nuts are tight. And then you've adjusted the valves. Usually you don't get it on the first one, by the way. It takes a couple attempts. And then you'll try to start it. And then you'll see what works best. Sometimes it's forgiving in the respect that you could be slightly over, slightly under, and still run. You can even achieve higher compression out of it. There's a lot of things you can do. But in general, you're going to need to know that. A lot of people don't know they have to adjust valves. And so the engine dies and they just think, since there's no compression, that they blew a piston or something. I've heard all kinds of things. Also gives you an opportunity to pick up good used generators that aren't running, by the way. I've done that where, you offer them $50, they give it to you, you take it, it's just a valve adjustment. They thought the engine was bad. More time. Again, follow procedure. Switch needs to be up. I would have missed that, incidentally. Switch needs to be up. And choke goes, I'm going to back off the choke. That's a nice running engine. Please, if you do this, stay away from it. If you have children, dogs, anything that might make contact with that. So it's not going to have to, it's not going to be access to it. Because that will get this to your hand time. Or the plastic, let's say, fabric, it's not going to stop very easily.